Think about a great teacher you've had. Maybe they had the class create a mural of the animals of the African savanna on the walls, or assign trebuchet building as a group project. So many great teachers make learning come alive, and often they make it look effortless. They might just be wildly talented at working with students. And for sure, some of them are. But teaching, like so many things we do, improves over time. One of the ways that teachers improve is by writing about teaching. They might write detailed lesson plans before their classes, take notes on what happened during their classes, then even write reflective essays or journal about what they've learned. That sounds like a lot, especially for already busy people. So some teachers use extensive writing to get their footing. Over time, their writing looks more like lists and their reflections look more like short notes to self. But they're using skills they've developed through that earlier, lengthier writing. We might not be planning on becoming teachers and shaping minds, but we can go through a similar process and improve our communication skills when we create a rhetorical analysis. We do extensive rhetorical analysis writing when we're just starting out and are learning about this analytical way of examining communication. But we can use the analytical skills we've honed in more informal contexts down the road. In this episode, we'll consider how a formal rhetorical analysis project might play out and how we might put those same skills to use outside the classroom. Hi, I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, and this is Study Hall, Rhetoric, and Composition. As we've said in other episodes, we talk a lot about theories and techniques, but at some point we have to actually, write to get better at writing. So in this writing practice episode, we're going in depth on writing a rhetorical analysis to learn more about how to do it and why it's helpful. We've already discussed the elements of a rhetorical analysis. And in that episode, we hinted at the idea of a formal rhetorical analysis, where we specifically spend time writing out each element. Now it's time to get into that. In a formal rhetorical analysis, we select one or more texts, like a speech, a conversation, an essay, or some other form of written communication. We then evaluate it and look carefully at 4 key elements of a rhetorical analysis that we've spent lots of time talking about individually: context, audience, purpose, and rhetorical appeals. And the goal is to explore what the text is trying to accomplish, and whether it's doing that effectively or not. So here's an overview. We start by collecting details about what the text is doing by reviewing it really carefully and asking ourselves questions about all of the elements. And then we can use those details to create a thesis statement or main point about the text. That might be a statement about how effectively it achieves its goals, or it might be a statement about some noteworthy or surprising aspect of the text. Here's an example of a thesis statement that could be used in a formal rhetorical analysis. Let's say we're analyzing a campaign speech. When we consider the context and word choice, we get the impression that the speech is trying to appeal to a younger audience, but isn't quite making that happen. We might come up with a thesis statement that says, "This speech attempts to connect with members of Gen Z, but word choice and the references used make it resonate more with an older audience." We then discuss evidence that will support this idea. In this case, we'd point to where the speech brings up mixtapes and the dot-com crash, and we'd explain why references to the 90s and early 2000s are mostly meaningful to millennials. When we're working on a rhetorical analysis paper, it may feel like we're being asked to overthink something and really analyze the heck out of it, or dig way too deep into tiny word choices or that allusion to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But that close attention to detail is exactly what's needed to create and support a powerful thesis statement. So let's see how this process works in more detail and dive deeper into formal rhetorical analysis. There are many ways to write a rhetorical analysis paper, but here's one way based on ideas about the writing process that we've already covered. Like with any writing project, we begin the writing process with invention. But here, we use invention techniques that are specifically focused on analysis, which is all about breaking down a large text into smaller, meaningful pieces. These pieces come from reading the text multiple times, really thinking about each aspect of it, and figuring out the elements that make the text effective or not. Taking lots of notes as we read can allow us to explore things we could write about. And as we discussed in our other rhetorical analysis episode, one way to start analyzing is to write down questions about the text. These could include questions like, how does timing affect this text? How is the interface or medium affecting the text? Or who are the audiences for this text? What's the text's purpose? And what strategies are being used to achieve that purpose? Often, either a physical or an electronic copy of the text is essential for this process. For instance, we can use color-coded highlighting or underlining to connect specific parts of the text to our questions. And during this invention process, we may have a hunch about what our main argument will be, but we don't have to. In fact, the next phase where we get into planning is a good place to start pulling things together. Using a strategy like affinity walls, we can start to see which pieces are connected and find themes. Loose groupings of details, questions, and possible answers may become the basis of sections in our analysis paper. We can also use planning as a time to determine the steps we still need to take to gather all our evidence, like researching the origin of certain words in the text or referring to documents that this text is related to. We might even use the planning phase as an opportunity to try out a few thesis statements. Having a thesis statement keeps us focused on the argument we're trying to make about the text we're analyzing and guides the details and evidence we pick out. Without a main point, we may write pages and pages and still not be sure what we're trying to prove. So if we need a starting point to get us going, we can use a simple thesis statement with this structure. This text is successful or unsuccessful at accomplishing its purpose with this audience because of its strategies or context. For example, if we're analyzing that campaign speech, we might write, the campaign speech didn't achieve the purpose of winning over an audience of new young voters because it used outdated references, alienating them and making them feel less included. Then we support our thesis with evidence. Though sometimes there's a lot of evidence, and it's not easy to tell what's our strongest. If we're not sure, we can roughly sketch out several potential arguments and take the strongest ones into drafting. This could be as simple as some bullet points, or a little more in depth, like a quick list of evidence that works for each argument. Now, up to this point, we've been conducting a rhetorical analysis. It's the nitty-gritty of figuring out what we think about the text by looking at as many details of the context, audience, purpose, and rhetorical appeals as possible. We may have flip-flopped, come up with contradictory ideas, decided that the text was brilliant and perfect, then decided it's actually really flawed, or any number of other changes of opinion. But that's part of the process. Rhetorical analysis is recursive. So sometimes we'll test out a way of conducting our analysis and realize that it isn't working. That's fine. We then go back to our original questions and see if there are strategies, purposes, or context we didn't fully analyze that could yield a new thesis statement about the text. Then once we finish conducting a rhetorical analysis, we switch to presenting a rhetorical analysis. We become communicators, and we present the evidence that makes our point. Our goal pivots from fact-finding and evaluation to communicating the results of our analysis. We begin tackling this new goal in drafting. Drafting is the part of the process when we shore up our case and craft a cohesive argument for the thesis statement we've developed. So for the thesis statement about the campaign speech, drafting would focus on showing how the references are not right for the youngest set of voters and explaining why that didn't serve the speech's goal. Then in revision, we can use different techniques to get a new perspective on our work. But we need to ask at least two questions. Is everything in the draft supporting our case? And is there anything else in our analysis that could make our case even stronger? We also want to make sure that ideas are presented in a logical order and that the transitions between ideas are strong. And finally, editing helps us make sure that no distracting typos, grammar, or style choices get in the way of making our case. Remember, the thesis statement is an informed, researched opinion. So someone could disagree with us, but we don't want them disagreeing because inappropriate language or typos are undermining our credibility. Again, there are many different ways to conduct and present a rhetorical analysis, and you should follow whatever requirements fit your situation. But the 5 steps of the writing process are flexible enough to serve us in many different kinds of rhetorical analysis work. Of course, we can do a formal rhetorical analysis without writing a paper. Like for work, we might create a slide deck for a meeting with management. And even when we aren't doing formal rhetorical analysis, there are times when the ability to come up with a point of view and marshal evidence to support it can really come in handy. Take our animated friend, Frederick. In college, Frederick took a rhetoric and composition course that taught him how to evaluate context, audience, purpose, and strategies. And at the end of the semester, he wrote a final paper that examined the language of newly passed laws in his home country to better understand their goals. Now, Frederick is a DJ, and while he hasn't had to write any rhetorical analysis papers for this job, he does use his rhetorical analysis skills when someone wants to hire him. He's found that a little bit of analysis of the rhetorical situation can tell him reliably whether or not to get his hopes up for a new gig. First, he considers the context. Did someone say, "Oh, you should DJ for me," just because Frederick said he's a DJ? Or did they come up to him at a party and ask for his contact information? Just paying attention to the place and time of the interaction helps Frederick to manage his expectations. Next, he evaluates the strategies people used when talking with him. Like maybe a potential customer named Yvonne mentioned specific dates and a budget, while Jamila rambled on about their taste in music. So using his evaluation skills, Frederick can develop an idea, or a mental thesis, of how much each person wants to hire him. Jamila may have been really excited to talk to Frederick about their favorite bands and singers, but Yvonne probably has an actual job for him. And sure, occasionally, Frederick is surprised to get a phone call from someone like Jamila offering him a job. Reflecting on these phone calls, Frederick realizes how important it is to make an authentic connection even when there isn't the prospect of being immediately hired. So while he isn't writing papers, Frederick has learned to evaluate people's credibility, emotion, and even the logic they use in order to anticipate future gigs. Like Frederick, we can better understand our interactions with people when we analyze their communication strategies. Formal rhetorical analysis helps us see some of the things we unconsciously evaluate in communication. It also gets us to dig deeper to develop observations we might otherwise have missed. Practicing our skills is a big part of why we write in composition classes. And you'll be amazed at how much your perspective on communication changes when you've done some of this analytical work. You'll see everyday conversations in so much more detail, even without writing 5 pages about them. Thanks for watching Study Hall Rhetoric and Composition, which is part of the Study Hall Project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you like this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall and the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time.